Eastside Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to our first episode of the Eastside Podcast. This week, we welcome Jamey Cummins to the program. Jamey is a consummate guitarist and fine songwriter in his own right, and is currently working on his debut album here at Eastside Music Studios. We'll talk about the creative process, the state of the industry for musicians today, and we'll even do a little picking. Stick around. Well, we're just jumping right into it. Welcome, listeners.
Well, ideally we edit
Future listeners.
No editing.
Well, I'll start, and
Cool.
then you can tell me what I'm saying wrong
Yeah.
and do it all over again.
Cool.
So the idea for the podcast, actually, Jamey mentioned that it would be cool to do a podcast, and I think maybe Austin and I talked about it once or twice, and it seems like that's a good thing that a lot of people are doing. And I thought if we were going to do a podcast, we have so many talented teachers and musicians that come through the studio that it would be pretty cool to talk about, the artist's creative process, what goes into writing a song, if they're recording, like that whole process, and honestly, like an open forum, so it can go anywhere.
Yeah.
But maybe that could be kind of like the impetus for it, finding talented people and just let them talk about how they create.
Totally.
So in the spirit of that, our first guest is Jamey Cummins.
Woo. Welcome, man.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and then of course we should introduce our hosts. So Austin Sisler is a studio engineer, co-owner, and I'm Alex Ballantyne, also co-owner, and he keeps me away from the studio stuff because I don't know what I'm doing. And of course we're in Eastside Music Studios, which is also where Eastside Music School is in downtown Austin, Texas, and so that's kind of where we are and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And like I said, our first guest is Jamey Cummins. So welcome, Jamey.
Yeah, thanks. This is cool. I'm glad it's happening.
It feels real.
Yeah.
It's funny to people out there listening because this podcast idea has only been around maybe a couple weeks, and then we just finally decided on ignition like yesterday, kind of just talking it out, and so we just planned it. So it's cool to have Jamey in. We obviously have known Jamey for a while. Jamey, I guess best place to start is just telling people where you're from, kind of a little bit of the background stuff of the music and everything.
Yeah, so I live here in Austin, but I've been here for almost, a little over 7 years. I came down here from Iowa, the other live music capital of the world. And it was a toss-up, but I was like, I'll give Austin a chance and see if it can live up to the Quad Cities where I'm from. And it's holding up all right.
You're still here.
I'm still here. But yeah, and I'm happy to be teaching guitar here at the Eastside Music School, downtown Austin, and that's kind of what I do during the day and play gigs at night. And I play a lot of vintage jazz and swing music around town. There's kind of a good scene for that. But I also am working on my own original music. I've been recording an album with Austin here at the studio. And that's more kind of like singer-songwriter, indie rock, kind of Wilco-ish kind of stuff that I've always wanted to do, and it's nice to be able to do both. I love the variety of music that I get to do.
Totally. And honestly, man, I mean, I knew that you were into kind of the surf rock stuff, that you were a singer-songwriter thing, but I really had no idea how talented you were as a singer-songwriter until you started coming up with these songs, and it really blew me away. Not just the melodic content, which I knew that you were good for, but the lyrics and all that stuff. I mean, these are great songs that you're writing.
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's trial and error for sure, and I think for every song that I'm decide to share with people, there's probably 10 other songs that I wrote that are just garbage or whatever. So it's all about quantity, I think, when you're trying to
being prolific and getting as much stuff down, and then seeing what sticks. Cool. Well, I don't know if you wanted some questions that you wanted to ask, and we can just see where they go, Austin.
Let's. So I was probably a little bit over prepared here, but I got some kind of list of questions here that we're trying to stay away from just the usual. Tell me your inspirations, all that kind of stuff too. So
crystals,
a little bit more
mostly.
Yeah, okay. What was that one we were talking in the car on the way, Jamey and I over, and I was asking him what questions would he like me to ask, and then what was your question that you?
If you're gonna ask me my third favorite Fraggle or something.
Yeah, that one's a little bit checked off the list there already, because we've already had that discussion. But I guess honestly, the best part to start is just when creating a song. Where do you start in the creative process? Because some people get inspired by melodies, some people get inspired by just lyrics or a phrase kind of thing. I'd imagine probably Bob Dylan leans a little bit more to the word side of stuff, and then other people lean towards not lyrics kind of thing. So
for sure, I think it definitely starts more with the music, more most often, And a lot of times with the chord progression, I really love
Yeah.
chords, and I'm really interested in cool chord progressions. So a lot of times that's what I'll have, and then maybe a melodic idea, and then I'll just have like phrasing. And the very last thing is usually lyrics for me, where I'm like, the song's already pretty much written, so I just try to fill in the right amount of syllables
Sure.
to make it work.
That's great. You know, it's interesting because I mean we're all guitar players, so I think chords are kind of where we probably usually go to. And I don't know if it's like a self-loathing thing for me as a guitar player that I really try and start with melodies.
Oh yeah.
But I've been doing that for a little while now, like really trying to hear a melody in my head and start there. And I'm not sure that there's one way that's better, or it's just different.
No,
but-
for sure. And I could see if starting with a melody would be interesting too, because then it's like, well, you could harmonize it a lot of different ways,
Right.
and get very different results. So that would be a cool thing to think about.
Sure.
But I guess I don't know how I would go about that. I guess you could just like record yourself singing the melody or whatever,
Yeah,
or playing
totally.
it. And
Yeah.
Totally. And then, like if you're in the car or walking or whatever, just trying to hear a melody in your head,
Mhm.
and then when you get in front of your guitar, if you can
yeah.
recall it, you know, then maybe it was a
For
melody
sure.
worth remembering, and if not, you know, it's gone in the ether. But
Yeah.
I bet it'd be interesting to see, people, because I know plenty of musicians that are just inherently songwriters, but not really as much like they're instrumentalists, and so they come up with mostly melodies and stuff in their head and lyrics instantly, and then they're going to try and figure it out on guitar, but they're not as prone. I wonder if it has anything to do with, did you start on guitar as like your first instrument kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, well, my first instrument was cornet, which is like a trumpet. And then I only did that for like 2 years before I switched over to guitar. But the instant I got a guitar, I was just making up songs. Before I even knew chords, I was making up songs at it. And because that's what I viewed the guitar as. Like,
Sure.
oh, this is what you make songs
Yeah.
with. So, I remember actually convincing my cousin that I wrote the song She Don't Use Jelly by Flaming Lips for whatever reason.
like that's really good.
Yeah, he's like,
Yeah.
you got something there. You should.
That's it.
But yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, like just to have the melody first, because it would take you out of your muscle memory on the guitar.
Yeah.
It's really easy to just fall back on the things the licks and scales and
Yeah.
chords. And having a melody to begin with might take you out of that. And
Sure.
just put
That's
you in a
something I
different
think
direction.
about a lot as a guitar player. I think all instrumentalists are probably kind of beholden to their instrument. They kind of think about music in terms of what instrument they play. If you
Yeah.
play guitar, you think about bar chords and
Yeah.
pentatonic scales, and if it's piano, it might be something different. And for me, a big part of trying to develop as a musician is really starting with the musical idea and not starting with like what my fingers want to do.
For sure. Yeah.
And it's easier said than done because you keep going back to what feels good and what you know you
yeah.
can do.
Yeah.
So really trying to think musically in your mind and then let your fingers express what you're
Yeah.
feeling and hearing.
Yeah. It's kind of like the ultimate goal, really, right? To play what you hear.
Play what you hear.
It's I'm a long way from being there, but it's definitely a goal for sure.
It's cool because just when you think I've heard other people say this before, but with music, like when you think it's easy, when you think you got it sorted out, you realize how infinite and limitless it is.
Yeah.
And it'll never get old. There's always
Yeah.
something to be working on.
For sure.
And it's not just about your skills, it's about how you hear and how you listen. And so like how you're perceiving music is probably different now than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. And it all comes down to what you're listening to, what you're inspired by. And I guess people always talk about like the unknown unknowns or whatever. So those things are probably always changing based on your taste and what you're into. And so there is no like, now I can, really improvise on this bebop song super
Right.
well. But then when I just want to like plug in a Telecaster and play a rock and roll song,
Yeah.
do I know how to do that still
Sure.
or whatever,
There's an art to rock and roll too.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. And I think that there's, being someone who plays both jazz and rock music, I definitely hear, not always, but once in a while, you hear some condescension from the jazz world about like, oh, that's easy. Anyone can do it. But it's like, well, theoretically, maybe on paper, it's easy. But
Yeah.
like to actually get up and do it and have it sound good is never easy. It's never easy to
takes a
make
lot of
anything
work.
sound
Totally.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of like Angus Young from AC/DC. He had a funny quote, because people always talk about AC/DC songs always being like the same like 4 chords all over
Yeah.
again. He's like, yeah, so someone told me that like, oh, you guys have made like 12 albums with the same 4 chords. And he's like, that disappoints me to hear that because we've actually made 13 albums with the same 4 chords kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I agree. There is like some kind of simplicity, talking from more the production side of like my basis kind of thing. A lot of the music and stuff that I respect that either I grew up with or that I'm like older enough now to kind of look in more in depth to, whether not just tapping my foot, but kind of like the production wise, is that there's just very simple things. There's not this overstatement of instruments stuff that, the really cool Motown stuff we listen to that sounds huge and all that stuff too. There's just so much space for instruments to kind of cooperate. Everything has a place, and that's just something that I really try to, cooperate and understand with when it comes to production. Like not everything needs to have, if you want the bass to sound bigger, don't add 4 more basses kind of thing. I mean, then you
take away.
Yeah, exactly. But then like Phil Spector, he added like 4 basses on all his tracks too. So there's a little bit of plus and minuses on both sides.
Yeah,
kind of thing. But
and at the end of the day, if it's just sounds like a good song and it, people feel connected to it, then you're doing something right.
Something's working.
Yeah.
Totally.
Getting back to your creative process, something that I'm always curious is how you take it from like a jam or a groove into like a song.
Yeah.
Like, how do you organize your ideas into songs?
I think for me that happens right away because I love songs.
Yeah.
I love like 2.5 minute to 3 minute pieces of music of all genres. Whether it's like I love Bach for that reason, and I love the Beatles and early jazz and anything that like fits in that period, that time space. So I'm immediately organizing those ideas into like verse, chorus, bridge sections.
Yeah.
And trying to tidy it up into this little thing. And then once it's like confined to that, then I can really like fine tune it and figure it out. I think if it's too open-ended, and that's just for me, if it's too open-ended and I'm like, oh, this could be a longer thing, then I probably would never get around to finishing it. But that's just me. So.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I think that I'm prone to just improvise music. And so it really takes a little bit of discipline for me to say, hey, this is a cool idea, or at least I like it. I should probably try and flesh it out a little bit and turn it into a song. So it's cool that you kind of do start there.
I do, because I don't know what else to do with it, I guess, because I do love just playing. Like, I have a loop pedal and effects, and sometimes I'll just kind of play around with ideas and come up with things that I really like, but then I'll never really come back to them because I didn't kind of solidify it into something particular.
Sure.
But it's really amazing now that we can just record ourselves all the time.
Yeah, which you do, Jamey. So you came into the studio with Austin to record your album, but that wasn't how it started. Can you talk a little bit about how you started recording this?
Yeah, it just was on my phone with GarageBand. I was just piecing together things, and I started playing around with that. I'd got a new phone or whatever because mine broke, and I was looking at the new GarageBand app and kind of was just like blown away by it.
Yeah.
At least for making demos, it's pretty awesome. And you can use the built-in drummer. They all have names and personalities. And they feel like my friends now. Shout out to Mason.
He's edgy.
But it's great, as long as you play like a strumming pattern to a click in there, you can start layering things on there, and it'll start to sound like a song right away. And it really inspired me to be like, oh, these could be songs if I really put some time into it, and brought them in here. We dumped them onto Pro Tools and started replacing things that needed replaced, and kept some things that
some
were
stuff you
usable.
actually kept. So like on your mastered finished tracks, like maybe Chicago is one that you have. There's some stuff that was actually recorded on your iPhone.
For sure. Yeah, there's some strummed acoustic guitars that were just recorded direct into the iPhone.
Yeah, for sure. It's very actually, now thinking about like the entire like piece of the record, it's very rare that we actually replace many acoustics. Almost all the acoustic stuff was just done through the old that headphone, like little microphone on your earbuds.
Because they kind of have this paper thin sound that works in the mix.
Totally.
They don't take up too much low end or high end. So they just
interesting. It cuts off the low frequencies a little bit.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, do you have some more questions you want to ask?
Yeah, let's go into those since we're talking about like the recording world. That's my background kind of thing. So. An interesting question I kind of thought of is what makes a good recording session? Like when do you, not even just me, but just like in your past of history of recording and stuff too, when do you feel like when you leave a session that you're the most satisfied is it because you got the most work done? Is it because, you finally nailed this one part that's been taking forever?
Yeah.
Best vocal take kind of thing? What?
Yeah. I think it's, for me, a really good session, and it depends, there are different types of things. There are like what we're doing where we're kind of piecing it together and doing I really enjoy that because you can kind of, every time I'll leave a session, I'll get a new mix that has like a new part in it, and it's all of a sudden it starts to feel like it's coming together more. And so it's like it reinvigorates me and my interest in the song itself. as opposed to the type of recording where you go in with a full band and you're all playing live.
Yeah.
That can be really fun too, because you just feel like you did a performance, and now you have a documentation.
You
of
captured the actual moment.
Yeah, but yeah, I think coming away with the feeling that you really added something new that was worthwhile to the song.
Sure.
And now you're one step closer.
Yeah, you're moving it forward.
Yeah,
forward progress.
Yeah.
Well, I know Jamey's our guest, but Austin, for you as an engineer, so like you do both. In fact, you did our buddy Cat Clemens album almost entirely live.
Yeah. Versus
Jamey has been kind of mostly overdubbing and piecing it together. For you, what do you like about the two?
Man, it's very interesting because I'm a little bit more on the producer role with Jamey between him and I for his record. So there's a lot of choices where we're like, oh, what do you think of this? Well, what do you think of this kind of thing? So we go back and forth, and there's a lot of cooperation between that. And I've always loved working with people no matter what, even if it was like I was like the end all, like George Martin producer, like whatever says goes kind of thing. I still want there to be people rather than someone just show up with the song. Hey, can you get the instruments and then I'll come back and sing the vocal? That's never really been like my scene. I'm still young in my career, so I guess I technically haven't got to fully do that. But I've been on sessions that way, and it just doesn't seem as much fun as like, even if like the musicians aren't the best in the world and stuff too. We don't. Not every recording studio works with amazing musicians. You have people that are just very home level that are coming in because they're passionate about it, kind of thing. Even working with people that are, just inspired to come in and cooperate, that is a very big thing to me. But at the same time, when I get to step back, like Cat Clemens, hopefully we'll get him on the show eventually kind of thing. It was very nice to, I had no producer role in that at all. So it was just engineering. So I get to literally sit and listen to, did I like the snare hit? Yep, that was great. That's like my perfect microphone choice, So I got to focus in on that world where, because of the way, the digital world that we work in today, in the recording world, there's only so much that there's a lot you can do actually, but like when it comes to being a producer and an engineer, it's sometimes a little difficult to be like, all right, I gotta focus on the snare sound. Now let me focus on is this guitar part right for the song? And so it was very nice in that sense to be able to just step away and just watch a band play. But it's also been very fun to work with Jamey and be part of the person that gets to help decide, is this the right part? Nope, let's try something else. Let's go on to a different song kind of thing. Producer role, a lot of people don't fully understand the true definition of that.
Kind of experimenting a bit. Yesterday, we took a recording of a rainstorm and put some reversed piano on it and just made a little interlude thing. And that's the kind of thing that you're not going to do in a live session, but it's really fun and it feels artistic. It feels like you're being creative and artistic and I'm really stoked on those kind of things.
Totally,
that's a good distinction. It's interesting. To think about how it's evolved, talking about your iPhone and that you can kind of make your own album in your bedroom.
Yeah.
And it's such a liberating thing, but it's so different than maybe 40 or 50 years ago when everybody had a very predefined role.
Oh, yeah.
Going back even further to Tin Pan Alley and the songwriters. So that it was somebody's job to write a song.
Yeah.
It was somebody's job to perform it. It was somebody's job to work the board and a producer. And so what you got were these really people worked really hard on these songs. It was a product of a lot of people.
Yeah.
It kind of maybe seems like in that era, it was kind of a rarefied era. Only very few people could get to the point of where they're really making great music and putting it out there.
For sure.
And nowadays, if you want to do it, you have all the stuff at your disposal, which is pretty cool.
But you also have to play all those roles yourself if you can.
Which I think Austin was kind of touching on this. It's not good or bad. It's just different. If you have one person who's very specialized at one specific thing, then you're kind of getting the best at each point.
Yeah.
If you're doing all those roles, you're not going to be the best at everything.
No, yeah, exactly. And I'm reading this book right now called The Jazz Standards, and it's really interesting because it's really just about the American songbook and the history of all. And the guy's these are the 250 jazz standards every musician should know. And they just goes in alphabetical order after you've gone, and then all the way up till whatever. But it's funny looking at the history of all these songs because they have the person that wrote the music and the person that wrote the lyrics.
Right.
And it's very rare that it's the same person that did both, which is very strange to me that because all those songs have a very sing-songy feel to them, and they're short 2-minute, 3-minute compositions. So it seems strange to me to write this thing that's very compact and really works as a song, and then hand it off to someone and say, now you put the words in there. But that's George and Ira Gershwin were that way, and looking back at Hoagie Carmichael, he was one of the few that would do both.
But
it's just really interesting to me but I love those songs, and I love the way that they just stand the test of time, and they really worked for new interpretations. You know, you take a song like How High the Moon. It was an old standard, and then all of a sudden Les Paul had a big hit with it, and then Charlie Parker turned it into a bebop song called Ornithology, and it's the same chord progressions, but like that song really held up to like reinterpretation.
And even now, I mean, how many dorks, myself included, were in the practice rooms in college just working out on those jazz standards.
Yeah, for sure.
And I love playing those songs. I mean, they're complex. They keep revealing themselves. You know, again, just when you think you got it figured out, you realize you're just scratching the surface.
Definitely. And so I love songs like that. They work just as a song. You could just play the chords and sing it, not even take a solo, and just there it is. It's a song. But it also, if you want to just strip it down to its basic elements, it's great. You know.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, it's funny you guys talked about, you know, like kind of the vintage way of like there was one person did one thing and then the next person did the next thing kind of thing. Because even like think on the recording side, you know, I studied up on like, you know, Abbey Road and stuff when the Beatles were recording there. And I've read so many interviews where like, you know, back in the day it was very uncommon to put microphones up close to instruments and stuff too. So you had to be pretty far back, and like there's just so many stories of like they would have to get like written consent from one of like the actual like white coat engineers to like move the kick drum mic within like 3 feet kind of thing and all that stuff too, because there was just someone who had to make that decision kind of thing. And then also another thought I had too is, you know, I'm not a person who grew up on much jazz stuff, but it is really cool getting to experience a little bit of the jazz taste that, you know, you have, Jamey, because like on a lot of your songs that like there are some very interesting chords that are very like unpop chords kind of thing, you know, like there's diminished chords and stuff too. I mean, like I pretty much know major and minor and a little bit of seventh stuff too. So I'm a very simplified, like much like pop listener stuff. So like it's pretty cool to see your influence on that too. And that's another question I kind of had is how much does like, you know, the vintage jazz stuff that you listen to so much, how much does that influence your current songwriting?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it's in there, but also I think I'm really influenced by pop music that does, like the Beatles, you know, there's a lot of hidden gems in Beatles songs, modulations and passing diminished chords.
Chromatic descending lines.
Yeah, for sure. All that stuff. Cash. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely influential because I'll hear a certain, like one sound I really like, I'll just play a little guitar here, is that like there's a certain 2-chord progression that is really common in jazz tunes. It's where you go from the 1 chord of whatever key you're in to a dominant 3-chord, you know? Which if you're just playing based on the major scale, then you would end up with a minor 3-chord, right? So I think songs like Georgia on My Mind does that, you know, Georgia, Georgia, whatever. All of Me starts that way. There's a lot of, you'll hear that, you'll definitely hear that in pop music as well. And by the way, those songs are pop songs. They're definitely, they were the mainstream pop songs of the era. So I don't think of them as being a separate thing necessarily, but I think of them being something to like tap into for modern stuff, because it does get a little dry with our current state of pop music, you know, that the 1-5-6-4 chord progression is still riding high. And for anyone not familiar with what that chord progression is, it's like, go on Spotify or YouTube and type in 4 chords and you'll hear this song by, I forgot the band, what they're called, but they're like a group of comedians.
Yeah. And they go through all the songs that have the same.
Yeah, they sing like 100 pop songs that are all that chord progression. Some of them are songs I love. You know, I'm not like dissing it.
Totally.
But you know, it's good to kind of step out of that once in a while. I think. Totally. And really, I like things that feel familiar, but then have one slippery slope or one thing in them.
I talk about that a lot with students as well. Like, music is all about setting up expectations and either fulfilling that expectation or not. Right? I mean, I guess that's life, but but either you get the payoff because it just feels right to resolve that, or you get a surprise and you're like, oh, that was interesting.
Definitely.
And it's kind of important to get both of that in there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. And those are my favorite songs are that way. I think, you know, they have one little thing about them. Like, you know, We Can Work It Out by the Beatles. There's a great, super catchy song. And then all of a sudden it has that little section where they go into a little 3/4 waltz, you know? And otherwise that song is just super straightforward. And it's great. And everybody knows it and sings along with it and probably doesn't even realize that the time signature changes inside of it. But I love that stuff.
It takes an artful composer to be able to throw in those curveballs without just kind of beating you over the head with it, so you could keep dancing to it.
For sure,
it's not going to be something that's distracting.
Yeah.
But then it again, the more you listen to it, you start to get a little deeper into it and realize, wow, there's a lot going on.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that there are audiences that really do like the obviously like complex music for sure. Like, Tool has like the #1 album in the country right now, I think. And they're known for their outrageous like 14-minute songs that change keys and time signatures and are based on the golden ratio and just
perfect.
Yeah,
Nice.
I mean, super in depth. And I mean, and I think it's awesome that people appreciate the art form enough to support that and buy those records and go out and hear bands like that. So
Yeah, it's true.
but what I really love is I want to hear more of that in the mainstream, more of that accessible to a wider audience, I should say, and on mainstream radio, because right now we're not getting much of that in the mainstream.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Actually, that's funny because one of my questions is that I just came up with is if you could change anything about the current music industry, what would it be? So you kind of said one thing. So give me something else that, or maybe touch on what you were just saying and then gone to another. Answer
I mean,
too.
I think the real sad part that has happened is we have like 2 giant corporations that own all the radio stations in the country. I think it's like Cumulus and Clear Channel own like almost every radio station. So
now we're not gonna be able to broadcast.
Yeah,
this
we're not gonna be able to
podcast.
put
they're
this up
gonna
anywhere.
they're gonna censor us the whole time.
The devil.
Yeah. But I mean, because of that, you end up with the same small playlist on every. And we're really lucky in Austin that we have good radio
Good radio.
stations.
We
here.
do. You're right.
We have awesome KUTX and we have Sun Radio.
Yeah.
Those are great, and they play all kinds of stuff. They play
they
a lot
really
of
do.
local artists. But you step outside of a city like this and you get into the more rural areas, you have very limited options of what you can hear on the radio.
Yeah.
You're going to hear the same 10 pop songs, same 10 country songs.
In a sense, that's not really new, right?
No,
Like that's been going, and I guess like the current state for a lot of us is just that what happens to be on the radio right now is pretty bad. I mean, if you go back to the early '90s, it was the same 10 songs, but maybe Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and
Yeah.
yeah,
pretty cool.
for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a distinction now that is really cool is there's so many places to get good music, even if
Yes.
not
It
on
is.
the radio.
Yeah.
So, and I know that Spotify musicians have a love-hate relationship with it, but for me, I love being able, and I do a lot of listening, a lot of teaching. Spotify has curated all these different playlists for me, and I got my jazz one, and my indie rock one, and my hip-hop one, and I'm always guaranteed to find something I didn't know about. And then it's cool because it's just a starting point. So you find something you like and you start researching and digging deeper and you find this whole, I found this whole entire kind of movement of lo-fi guitar hip-hop music.
It's awesome,
That
right?
I didn't even know was a thing. And I'm like, this is what I was trying to do 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get anybody excited about it. And to know that there's like probably so many other people like me who are just in their bedroom doing it. And then a few
Definitely.
kind of break out and
Yeah.
actually make a name for themselves. It's pretty exciting.
It's great. And like you said, a lot of people are upset, and understandably so, about like, the payout on like things like Spotify. But I don't look at it as like a source of revenue. I just look at it as a platform to make my music accessible.
Sure.
Totally.
And, if you want to sell stuff, you just have to figure out like what people want. And people still like vinyl records.
Yeah.
So if you make a vinyl and they already like your music and they like buying vinyl records because they collect them or whatever, then you can probably sell those to them.
1+1.
Or if they like tapes, whatever your audience likes, T-shirts, whatever. But you're not going to make that money from streaming,
Totally.
but you're going to maybe increase your fan base.
Yeah,
and-
theoretically, then
Yeah.
when you're on the road, people know about you and they're coming to your shows and buying tickets because
Yeah.
they found you through platforms
Totally.
like Spotify.
For sure. So, I could complain about it, but it's like, hey, people in like Paris are listening to my song. That's pretty cool.
Pretty gratifying.
And there's no other way I could achieve that, probably.
Yeah, no, I agree that is the funny thing is that you can complain about things, and there's still, you have the right to, but you can also learn to accept them in certain ways, and it's how can you get along in the modern age of music streaming, because streaming is here, and before that it was something else, and before that it was something else. So like what's the next step kind of thing? How can you be most prepared to go for the next thing? Because you're right, because most artists can't make a living off streaming kind of thing.
No,
And
exactly.
so whether or not it's going to be fixed by bills that are trying to be passed in Congress, maybe not, but it's how can you evolve in the modern world of music.
Teaching at your local music school.
Hey, taking
Yeah,
lessons.
for sure. Just if you're putting music out there, you're a person that likes to create things, and so take that passion that you have about just making things. Maybe you make a little. One idea I had is I want to make a little handmade booklet, a songbook that has like the chords and lyrics to all my songs and with illustrations and things in it, and I'll try to sell that at shows for like $10 or $15 maybe.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
And I think
Jamey.
if people like your
It's unique.
songs, they'll probably buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know?
That's great, man. Do you want to play a little music?
See, I'll do some music. Yeah.
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 So,
Jamming.
this is, as you would never guess it, but this is our first podcast ever. So, I mean, we're just on fire.
We're
born
killing
for
it.
this
Yeah.
stuff. But kind of one of our thoughts was, just as most of our guests will probably be musicians, to maybe do some music in the studio as well. So, we talked a little bit about doing an original tune from Jamey here.
Yeah. I thought this song might be fun to talk about just because the chord progression is definitely kind of influenced from something you maybe would hear in a jazz tune, or more specifically, kind of like a bossa nova.
Yeah.
Like a Joe Beam thing or something.
Sure.
I've always loved that music because of the way that the chords descend. You know, like if you look at a song like How Insensitive or something, they like starts on this minor chord and goes to the diminish. And like, you know, you have these chords that keep descending down, yeah. And then a simple melody over top. The chords are super complex.
Right.
But the melody would be very simple and kind of sing-alongable or whatever. So I always thought that was cool.
Yeah.
And I had heard interviews with, believe it or not, one of my favorite bands is Stone Temple Pilots. So
Hey.
I love that band. And the bass player, Robert DeLeo, is really into like Joe Beam and bossa nova stuff. And he even talks about like some of their hit songs, like Interstate Love Song. He originally wrote that as like a bossa nova thing.
I can
And-
hear it.
Yeah, and just turned it into a rock song. And
Yeah.
it's super cool. It's a really interesting chord progression. So I'm not saying that mine is, but I'm just saying that that's what mine's influenced by. So it's got this movement. You know, I've got like a C chord with G in the bass for anyone taking notes at home.
Yeah.
And I'm going down a half step here to a diminished chord, and I go back to that chord, and then I bring it up. So I was just thinking about the bass movement here, and then I'm going up again. So without getting too analytical, maybe we could just jam.
Just
Yeah,
play
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, man. But it sounds great.
All right, so
So Jamie's going to play and sing, and maybe I can just
Yeah,
kind of try and
just
figure
jam
if I
along.
can find a
Right
place
away.
to
Yeah.
play with you.
cool. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Throwing up our hands, calling it a night. I know you wanna break my heart, but you have the right. You have the right. Cover me in gas. Give the night your lies. I know you wanna burn me down, dear. Well, go ahead and try. I'm already on fire. Ooh, I tried to fake it. Ooh, that ain't the way that it works. Ooh, I'm not a sadist, but I will say this. Whatever it's worth, which isn't very much. I guess I should have had a good deal. I should have had a hunch, but I was out to lunch. Take the course now. Ooh, I tried to fake it. Ooh, that ain't the way that it works. Ooh, I'm not a sadist, but I will say this. I gotta learn. So we're throwing up our hands, calling it a night.
Yeah, man.
There you go.
That's great, Jamey. I'd never heard that before. So
Oh, thank.
beautiful tune, man.
But yeah, I can almost hear that as like a.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, man. Well, maybe kind of like a hidden track. At the end.
that's not a bad idea.
Comes
Do
back in.
a little bossa nova elevator music in between. Yeah.
That's great, man. Well, I don't know, Jamey. It's just really an honor having you here as our maiden guest.
Honored to be here.
You've been teaching with us for a few years now. I mean, you're one of our first teachers at this school. So
it's been awesome to see it grow.
Continually just thankful to have you and be a part of it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Last thing I got is a little speed round because
Let's do it.
happen to know Jamey pretty well, so I figured I'd ask some pretty tough questions to this guy to answer. I always like when people wrap up with this
Sure.
kind of stuff too. Maybe Alex, you can join in if you feel really sensitive about a certain subject.
Third favorite Fraggle? Is that-
Yeah, third favorite. Not second. not
Actually,
first.
don't know their names.
Funny enough. So like 30 seconds on each of these questions. So
Okay.
quick little answers. So first one is never drink topos or never eat tacos again.
Oof.
Jamey, a quick backstory. Jamey
Yeah.
is pretty much the single-handed reason we fund topos here for people to buy. 'Cause,
Totally.
almost half his paycheck probably goes to it.
I would have to cut out the Topo Chico, I think, because
Wow.
tacos are, you can have any kind of taco. You can make them for breakfast, lunch, dinner,
It's fair.
and even dessert. There's Choco tacos. So I think,
That's true. That's a good point. Alex, what you got?
Oh, the random question?
Yeah, forget. No, it's not. Would you rather never drink topos or never eat tacos again? You're also a big topo
So
drinker.
I'm but not like a faithful loyalist like
Okay.
Jamey. So HEB sparkling water
Yeah.
gets-
Amen.
does it for me. And
Okay,
so I would
fair
have to
enough.
cut out Topo.
There you go. Smart. See, he
Yeah.
went around the backside there.
Yeah.
So, okay. How about someone walks up to you and says, "Hey, I got your dream guitar for you," and they pull it out of a case, and it's what would be your dream guitar?
there's-
Any question?
It's super hard to say, but maybe a 1939 ES 150 Charlie Christian
Okay.
style, Gibson that's in good condition. That would
Sure,
be that would be a dream
feedback
guitar.
all
Clearly,
day.
you've never thought about that before.
in rose gold or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
What about what finish would it be?
It'd be sunburst.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Solid color.
Yeah.
How about Stairway to Heaven or Freebird? Which is the better one if there can be a decision?
I'm gonna have to go with Freebird. I
Really?
think. Yeah.
I think I'm a Stairway guy.
Yeah.
Which one would you rather be there for the recording of, or be a part of the recording?
That's a different question. I would
Okay.
have to go with Stairway maybe.
Okay,
on that.
a little more, a little cooler. What about
Yeah,
same
just
same
to be
answer?
around those dudes.
I mean, when I was in 7th grade picking up the guitar, Jimmy Page was definitely
The man.
that. I loved it. But it's funny going back and listening to it. Some of his playing is almost a little sloppy, but the energy,
Yeah.
it's just, you
the
cannot
right kind of
question
sloppy.
it. Yeah. It
Yeah.
just it cuts through.
He was what's that fact that I think Jamie, you and I have talked about this, that he was on almost 80% of the recordings coming out of England
Yeah, he's
or
a
London.
session guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. At a very young age.
Yeah, and
too.
what was it, the mid '60s? He was on at least 70 to
Yeah.
80% of the recordings.
That's
And he's
crazy.
not even
Yeah,
credited for
so-
half of them because he was just a
Yep.
paid musician. Let's see, coffee or soda? Which is the better?
Coffee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Coffee.
Coffee. Which one would you rather give up?
Soda.
Okay, I guess that makes sense because coffee is the better one.
Yeah.
All right, here's a good one. So you're an Iowa native.
Yeah.
So would you rather be in Texas in the dead of summer or Iowa in the dead of winter? What's worse?
They're both pretty bad,
Yeah.
but I would say dead of summer Texas, it's
rather-
a little more tolerable.
Okay.
I'd rather be here. Yeah.
What's the
know.
coldest you remember in Iowa?
It got, last year they had the polar vortex. It got to negative
Oh, that's
50.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that stuff that came through. That's hit Chicago and stuff about that. What about you, Alex? What about Iowa in the winter or Texas in the summer? How about
I've never been to Iowa, man. I would go to Iowa in the summer if that's a possibility.
Yeah. What about Alex is a semi-New York guy. What about that? What about New York in the winter?
I love Texas. I really do. It's pretty brutal with the heat, but it does seem like it's easier to escape the heat than the cold.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So how about let's see, do I have another question on here? Let me see if my other ones we didn't get to. How did you come up with the band name for? Because it's Jamey Cummins
and
and
the City Hands.
Yeah,
that
that's a good
is
one.
a Jaws reference, actually.
Oh,
It's
really?
From the what's his face? The guy that they use his boat to get the shark and all that.
Uh-huh.
He's super funny in that movie too.
Okay.
But he grabs the scientist guy
Mm-hmm.
who is Dreyfuss, Richard Dreyfuss
Uh-huh.
plays that character, and he's he's like, "Let me see your hands. You got city hands, Mister Hopper."
and that inspired it. So Jamey
Yeah,
nice,
Cummins
dude.
and
Kind of a
City
weird
Hands.
scene. Yeah.
All right, two more.
But I
then.
almost think of it as like, there's farm hands and that. So
Oh,
like
that's a good
city
point.
hands are like
Yeah.
I like that.
my
dude.
helpers.
Yeah. It's funny. All right, so if you didn't become a musician, what would you be doing right now? What would
That's tough. I'd probably be a machinist because that's what my family does.
fall in the tradition?
I
Interesting.
worked in a machine shop for a long time from the age of like 15 till I was 25,
Man.
running CNC lathes and doing all kinds of
Really?
other stuff like that. So
You got all your digits.
yeah, I
You
do,
lose a
and
finger?
that was part of the reason I quit. I got my finger caught in a sander at one point.
really?
And, I'm lucky that it wasn't too bad. But there's a lot of people missing fingers
Yeah.
in
Oh, I
that
believe
line
it.
of work.
Yeah.
And that's what my dad does, and all his brothers and my grandpa. They're all machinists.
Wow.
So that's probably what I'd be doing.
What about Mr. Alex Ballantyne over there? He's a woodworker. He's a music studio owner, a music school
Yeah.
owner. What
Jack
would he
of
be
three
doing?
trades.
Yeah. What else?
Yeah.
What's the fourth trade of Jack that you would be doing? if none of the
It's
stuff existed?
interesting because I went to college as an undeclared major and I almost failed out because all I could think about was playing guitar.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I don't know if I would have been successful.
Just general studies or something like that.
General studies, undeclared in life.
Yeah, undeclared in life.
That's
That's
the
funny.
tricky thing is like most kids, they go into college and they don't
Yeah.
know what they want to do, and they're asked to like major in something that's going to define the
Yeah.
rest of their life at that point. And
Totally.
they're going to end up, not to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a
but,
different podcast, social
Yeah.
justice podcast.
So I mean, I feel. That being said, I feel super lucky that I felt the calling of
Yeah.
music at an early age.
Totally.
And it like gave me the direction I needed.
Something to lean on for your
Yeah.
whole life,
Yeah.
I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
I felt a little different because I grew up doing a lot of music and stuff, or at least listening to my dad. He was a big, like Def Leppard, 38 Special, like all the classic rock stuff for sure. And so I grew up listening to that stuff a lot, and same with 90s country. But I never felt like I wasn't like 13 and put on an album like this changed my life. I
Yeah,
was like
yeah.
at 17, my parents were like, "You gonna go do something with your life?" And I was like, "All right, well, I mean, I guess I can't be a soccer player, so I guess I've been playing guitar for years and taking lessons from some chump in
Enter
Austin."
Alex.
Yeah, enter Alex Ballantyne into my life.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, I guess I'll do like recording stuff because I thought
Yeah.
about getting on like actually like TV stuff and then mixing live
for
stuff
sure.
for TV.
Yeah.
And then I just went to recording school and found the recording world and became obsessed with gear and patch cables and
Yeah.
here I stand kind of thing.
And I mean, I think that leads to something maybe we could all say is like a piece of advice of if you find something that you really love, don't worry too much about like what specific job is attached to it.
Yeah.
I would say just learn as much as you can about it and work really hard at it. And the road will open up as far
Isn't
as
that
like
interesting?
possibilities.
I was
Yeah.
given that advice when I was in college and really down, and I couldn't hear it.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So part of that is just living, but it's just this focus to be like appreciated and good and better than your other people.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Who's top.
and the people who know say, don't worry about that. Just
Yeah.
focus on getting as good as you can and everything else will come. And it's crazy that that's mostly true.
It is, yeah. And it's funny because it's like it feels cliche almost to say, but it's like probably cliche for a reason
Yeah.
because there's a lot of truth to it.
Yeah. All right, and last question of all. So the world ends today. What song that you have written would you be most proud of? What is like the end all,
Wow.
be all of ones you've written?
Oh,
whether
I
we've
don't
heard it or
know. I
not?
mean, that's, yeah.
Or like what song out of all of them one speaks to you, or just maybe Chicago and Hinterland are the two singles you got out right now. Like maybe what speaks to you between those
yeah,
guys. Or-
I don't know. I do have this song that I wrote a while back that is like a kind of a post-apocalyptic love song. It's kind of tongue-in-cheek,
Perfect.
called Mayday. And that one I always felt like it like came together pretty well.
Mhm.
So I'll go with that one because it's got the end of the world theme going on.
That's fair.
Appropriate.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well, cool. That's pretty much my speed run.
Yeah.
Awesome. This
Yeah.
feels good.
Yeah, agreed.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jamey.
Yeah. Thank you to our sponsors, Topo Chico and
Ooh,
tacos.
hey,
Just
general
tacos, the taco industry.
What if like how like napkin or like Kleenexes people say like are a general term, but that's
Yeah.
like just the brand of Kleenex? What if tacos were just a brand? Like what else would they be called? You know?
Like if
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's funny in the, being from the Midwest, when people say tacos, they're usually thinking about like Taco Bell and
Oh, the classic.
but it's awful. I mean, it's a shame that they're not experiencing the taco heaven that we have
that
here
is fair.
in Austin,
yeah.
Do you want to play us out?
Sure. Do you want to jam on something
Yeah,
in
man.
particular? We already played that one tune, so maybe we could like,
Well, you mentioned How High the Moon.
yeah.
We
yeah,
might as
I'd be
well
down to
little
turn
jazz
turn
stuff.
gears,
Yeah.
and if we mess it up, we can just fade out.
That
So-
sounds good to
It's
me.
good news.
In key of G, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
Do you play the melody or do you?
I'll give the melody
Yeah,
a
for
shot.
sure. All
Just
right.
come right in on it, right?
Yeah.
This is a 1, 2, a 1.